I was talking about water in the last section when I was so rudely interrupted by the 15-minute mark. And what you have here, particularly in the on the right, the one closest to the bottom of your screen, you have the indication of polarity, where the electrons are not shared equally. The oxygen atom is much bigger in size. You can see that. So that means its charge is going to be stronger. It's going to have more of a pull on those electrons. Even though they're shared, they'll still orbit hydrogen. They won't orbiting hydrogen as much as the oxygen. And that gives this molecule polarity. If it comes in contact with another water molecule, water compound. Sorry, I do this, and I'm sorry. There is a difference between molecule and compound. Another water compound, that they will repel each other, and they will repel each other to the point of lining up the molecule, the compounds in a certain way based on their polarity, as well as the cells, as I talked about. And furthering the concept of bonding, which is really what we're trying to get to. In bonding, you have two major aspects, and we're going to, the next slide, we're going to go into a chemical equation where you have two sides of the equal sign. You have reactants, and that's on one side, and products on another. So the reactants are what's going forward with the particular whatever action chemically that's going on, and the products are the result of that chemical action, whatever is going on. And with regard to metabolism, you are doing this constantly. Your body is constantly in this state of a chemical reaction. It's called life. We have no, there is no life if there's not chemical reactions going on all the time. The types of chemical reactions that you will learn about are decomposition reaction and synthesis. So breaking down and building up. Breaking down is called catabolism. Building up is called anabolism. So the main breaking down reaction is decomposition reaction. It breaks chemical bonds of the reactants. So we have a reactant AB. The chemical bond between the A and the B molecule is broken apart, and it's broken apart to create two separate molecules, one of A, one of B. The most likely, and the way the body does this, is to inject water into the picture. So we call it a hydrolysis. Water lyses the reactants, so hydrolytic reaction, where you have A and B with the bond plus water equals, and what happens is that bond is broken between the A and the B, and hydrogen then is attracted to the A molecule. Hydroxy ion, HO, is attracted to the B. So you have different products. Then on the other side of that coin, or the other side of the reaction, the building up portion of it, synthesis reaction, forms a bond. So you take A and B as their molecular products and bond them together to form the AB compound. This is called a dehydration synthesis. So dehydration, you're going to take water out. So you take the products of that decomposition reaction, the A molecule bonded to H, which is a compound then, the HO, which is a hydroxy ion, bonded to B, and then you take them through the chemical reaction, you get the AB bonded again, and then water as a byproduct. So AB as a compound and water. And with an exchange reaction, this happens back and forth, where you have a decomposition and then a synthesis. And with this synthesis, you can see you're actually taking two products, A and B and C and D, and ending up with an AD product or a BC product. So we're ending up with a different product. So this exchange reaction happens quite often where new products are created from old ones or ones that are already existing in the body. And the body does this all the time, particularly when you're talking about something that's non-essential, like a non-essential nutrient. A non-essential nutrient is still important. It's just that the body can create that nutrient via these exchange reactions. So it can create that nutrient because there are the basic building blocks already existing in the body or in something that you've ingested, eaten. A little bit about enzymes, and we'll do more about enzymes a little bit later, is this bonding. This bonding requires energy. So this breaking of bonds always requires some sort of input, some sort of energy input. And most of that is going to be ATP, which some of you know about, some of you will learn about later in this chapter. And what happens is enzymes lower the amount of energy needed to get that reaction started. So they're very important because otherwise we would be expending much more energy just to do these basic body functions. And honestly, we expend a tremendous amount already just to do basic body functions. Most of the energy that you ingest, if you are eating what is considered a normal daily calorie intake for you, is just being used. Most of those calories, most of that's ingesting is just to keep you alive, just for your basic body functions like breathing, muscle tone, not even moving, muscle tone, and keeping your body in normal temperature, normal pH, and normal blood pressure. So you have a nice image here with regard to explaining how enzymes, which are proteins, they are catalytic proteins. So catalysts are compounds or enzymes or proteins that lower the activation rate of a reaction without being changed themselves, and end up creating these products at a lower energy rate than without them. So they're very important in the body. More concepts, just more terms to get in your head. Nutrients, molecules obtained from food, metabolites, and generally nutrients are molecules because they need to be pretty small, pretty basic to be absorbed, but I wouldn't use that term globally with regard to nutrients. Your book chooses to, and maybe that's a good thing for you to do at this time, but I wouldn't necessarily go to the bank with that. Metabolites are what is broken down by the body, so something the body recognizes as, yes, I can use this. And you have this concept of inorganic compounds and organic compounds. And inorganic is anything that, or inorganic is not based on carbon and hydrogen, not based on carbon and hydrogen. And so water is an inorganic compound by these terms, by this concept. I know some people think of water as organic because we see it all over the place, but based on these terms, it's inorganic. And then organic compounds are those based on carbon and hydrogen, such as carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. We will talk about all of those in some detail in the rest of the lecture. So inorganic, organic. Inorganic water is probably the most, you're about 70% water, and it is a very important compound, I guess, with regard, I mean, I would use that very important compound, or even trying to think of what I would call the idea of water is so it creates a solution with regard to what you have in your cell and outside of your cell that sets up this stage that allows all these metabolic activities to take place. Speaking of water and properties of water, as I said, about 70% of your body 2/3 or 70%, etc., is water. You have a water compartment outside the cell and inside the cell. We call that extracellular and intracellular water compartments. And there are some very basic properties of water that make it as important as it is, and one of them is the solubility. Water has the ability to dissolve the solutes, so those ionic bonding compounds will dissolve or disassociate in water. Again, think of sodium chloride, salt in water will dissolve into the ions sodium and chloride. And so water's ability to dissolve a solute in a solvent and make a solution. So the solute is the sodium chloride, the solvent is water, the solution is the sum total of water and sodium chloride. It has a high reactivity. It goes back to that polarity of the molecule. It has high heat capacity. This is how we can, it's one of the key features with maintaining our body temperature. It's an excellent lubricant. And so think of your saliva is mostly water. Think of, in the first chapter we talked about serous membranes. We talked about the visceral and the parietal, and then the fluid in between those membranes. That's a water-based fluid. Serous fluid is water-based, and that allows for those lungs to expand and contract without having friction. And if you had friction, you'd have pain, and that would be not fun. You also have water in blood. Blood is mostly water, plasma, and that allows that fluidity of blood, and you have water in mucus. Think of all those areas where mucus lubricates. And as I said, ionic bonding ionic bondings disassociate in water. In terms of polar they keep them in solution. The hydration spheres keep ions and small polar molecules in solution. So keep them, I guess, floating around. You can think of, as opposed to eventually getting back together and dropping down to the bottom of the glass. And if you've ever made iced tea and made it really sweet, because sugar disassociates too, but you make it so sweet that this this idea of hydration spheres is saturated, because there is a saturation rate in all chemical activity, then you have some sugar in the bottom. So you still have sweet tea, but you can see the sugar in the bottom, because what you've done is you have overwhelmed the capacity of that water to keep things in solution. The concept of pH, we'll get started on that in this one and probably have to move on with regard to the next one. pH is the concentration of hydrogen ions in a solution. Neutral pH is 7, so you have a balance of hydrogen and hydroxy ions. Acidic is lower than 7, basic is higher than 7, and human blood is a very neutral 7.35 to 7.45. And human blood is very much held at that level. It's very important your blood pH does not change. And then you have that definition of a pH scale. Inverse relationship with hydrogen concentration. You have the lower the number, or lower the pH, and hydroxy ions higher, have the higher the pH. We have a nice image here, and I knew I was going on to this, is why I was saying that quickly. So you have the blue-red color. This is totally arbitrary. Red goes more acidic, blue more basic, and the lower you get in number, you have increasing hydrogen ions. Higher you get in number, you have decreasing hydrogen ions but increasing hydroxy. And you have some kind of interesting images, interesting ideas of what pHs of things that you recognize are. This is where we'll pick up with the next one, and thank you very much for listening.